is Fair by Jeffrey Cook and Katherine Perkins is a 2015 young adult urban fantasy book, and book number 1 in the Fairfolk Chronicles. Set in Seattle, Washington, it focuses on a teenage girl who learns that her biological father is a king of fairies, making her half fairy and duty-bound to rescue her imprisoned father in the fairy world. It feels heavily derivative of the Percy Jackson and the Olympians books by Rick Riordan. It could easily be characterized as Percy Jackson but for girls, and with a focus on Irish myth instead of Greek. I came by the book at Geek Girl Con. A book vendor asked me what kind of books I was into, and I asked if she had anything like Legends of Bold Riley, the lesbian graphic novel I recommended in my Q&A video. I gave an outline of the plot, and she recommended Foul is Fair. Having read the book, I can see why she did this. They share a few common elements, and Foul is Fair has a notably queer-friendly slant, with some of its supporting characters. But it doesn't have anywhere near the quality of Legends of Bold Riley, and betrays an amateurish tone to its writing style. The protagonist is a 17-year-old girl named Megan O'Reilly, a talented artist and musician. She has ADHD, and her strict mother makes her take a series of pills to suppress the symptoms of it. This is horrifying to her best friend, Lani Kahale, a native Hawaiian girl who can see the drugs taking away Megan's creativity and making her perform better in math class at the expense of her artistic talent. Lani also happens to be part Menehune, a mythological dwarven Hawaiian people compared in text to hobbits, and when she learns that Megan is half she realizes that Megan's fairy nature is being suppressed, and gets a pixie friend named Aisling to replace Megan's most troublesome drugs, a set of orange pills, which I think is a reference to Adderall, with vitamin C supplements. This brings back her artistic talent, and enables her to see elements of the fairy world when they make themselves known to her. The first part of the book focuses on the issue of Megan's ADHD not really being a problem, and her needing to be liberated from her mother's oppressive pill regimen. This starts the book off on a flawed note where the protagonist doesn't have any power over her own destiny. She is not allowed to analyze her condition and make an informed choice to take the orange pills or not as suits her. She is just being bossed around by her mother and has her pills be manipulated by Lani and Aisling without her consent. Her lack of any real power in her own destiny remains a problem throughout the entire book. The issue of whether or not ADHD is a problem, and whether or not it should be met with medication, is a hot topic in American society, so I can understand the authors wanting to tackle it. However, it is an issue that needs to be addressed by the people directly affected by it. The character with ADHD needs to analyze her own condition and take actions to better herself. A note in the acknowledgments indicates that neither of the authors have ADHD themselves, so the way that the book frames it feels like an extension of the author's own distance from the subject. At a distance, the authors decided that medication for it was bad, and so wrote Lani at a distance, deciding it was bad, and at a distance, manipulating Megan's medications without her consent. Megan never really feels violated, and easily forgives Lani for this offense. And this is very disrespectful to the people who have ADHD and should be the ones making the decisions about their own conditions. I believe it is derivative of the Percy Jackson plot device where ADHD and dyslexia are genetic traits of demigods that are misunderstood by mundane society as disabilities. Percy suffers in school because he has these conditions that don't work well in highly regimented academia, but when he starts going on heroic quests, they become advantageous. His ADHD gives him good reflexes, and his dyslexia makes him intuitively understand the variant of ancient Greek that everyone in the supernatural world uses, and the books are fundamentally about him empowering himself and trying to help his friends. That makes sense because Rick Riordan was writing for his son Haley, who has ADHD and dyslexia, and he wanted to give his son a heroic figure who is empowered by what other people call disabilities. This is a stark contrast to the distance manipulation seen in Foul is Fair that yanks Megan around and never lets her empower herself. Without her orange pills, Megan learns about the fairy world. She meets Aisling, the pixie with torn-off wings, who uses a crow to get around. Lani tells her about Menehune. They're chased by a redcap. They're rescued by a female satyr named Cassia, who is pansexual, attracted to any gender, and also to the god Pan. And they meet her friend Kerr, an androgynous brownie with the ability to shapeshift. Megan wonders what Kerr's pronouns are and never finds them out, implying that Kerr could have a non-binary gender identity. There's a decent diversity in the characters here. Aisling is essentially a person with a disability using a service animal, and it also fits in perfectly with the theme of pixies and animal friends. Menehune, while not entirely unheard of, are a lesser-seen character in American fantasy, and their presence allows for more racial diversity. Cassia brings the queer element, and while sort of making a flirtatious comment to Megan once when she won't stop staring, is allowed to be a friend who is fundamentally safe, and isn't seen as creepy for perhaps being attracted to the protagonists. The word pansexual is not often used in modern fiction, so it's a point for inclusivity while still being thematic for its joke about Pan, as well as being appropriate for a story set in Seattle to feature some form of queer representation. It's not San Francisco, but the city is pretty gay-friendly. Kerr doesn't get a lot of character, and is kind of inscrutable as this androgynous person, but they're fundamentally an ally to Megan and Lonnie, and they play a big part in the climax. There is a lot of world building that is discussed in big info dumps, but doesn't play a big part in the story. The relevant parts include a conflict between two main courts, the Seelie and the Unseelie. The Seelie are what would typically be considered good guys, while the Unseelie are what would typically be called bad guys. But there is indicated to be some moral shades of gray. Unfortunately, this is more told than shown. Megan and her father are Unseelie, and absolutely nothing comes of that. You'd think there'd be a conflict where Megan tries to figure out if she really wants to help her father because he looks like a typical bad guy, and the spiel on the back of the book indicates that this is something that was supposed to be worrisome, but there is only a minor exchange about Unseelie not really being evil, just more likely to root for slashers in horror movies? This needs clarification. What the heck? The group goes into the fairy world, where they go on a quest to retrieve a magic sword, whose name I'm not even going to try to pronounce. They get a new teammate in the form of a boy from the 14th century who went after the sword before and got stuck. He really reminds me of JP from the Carmilla web series, but I don't think the timing matches up for him to be derivative. To make a long story short, they get the sword and go back to the human world, where Megan learns that her stodgy mother used to be a creative singer who published a few CDs. While listening to her mother's songs, she finally makes a decision for herself and comes up with a way to save her father on her own. And this involves a trick that the reader isn't in on. The main action we see Megan taking isn't really Megan, it's Kerr. The whole action scene we read about is just a diversion, so that Megan can go release her father. I frankly feel that this is cheating. The reader shouldn't be fooled like that. The reader should be in on the actual plot and following Megan trying to achieve it. The tension coming from will she or won't she? Not being lied to about Kerr being Megan in order for there to be a twist. Lying to the reader and then suddenly telling the truth isn't a twist. A real twist involves following a character, becoming invested in that character, and the character either being surprised themselves or doing something surprising that makes sense based on what previously happened. Lying to the reader about which character we're following is just cheating. Megan finally gets to meet her father, who assumes the throne and has a dance party, with Megan's mother's music playing. This meeting is a lot less emotional than it should be. She should have a lot of conflicting emotions. What is her connection to this man? Does she care about what he represents? What does she feel about the Unseelie coming into power? Unfortunately, this is all glossed over for a simplistic happy ending. When she gets back home, Megan gets permission from her mother to take singing lessons, and we are left with the implication that everything will work out for her. And so concludes Foul is Fair. There are elements to like about the book. As I mentioned, there is diversity, and there is a very strong female element. There is also a sense of modernity that most young adult authors struggle to achieve without rampant pop culture references. There are some pop culture references, but there are also references to using social media sites and the use of words like pansexual to make the book really feel like a product of the modern world, and not the generation before struggling to catch up. However, there are a lot of flaws in the writing, most notably Megan's lack of autonomy, that make me unlikely to pursue the second book in the series.